ADP fallers, Kansas City backfield stack. We're here to talk about whether the Chiefs RBs are falling so much that we just, at this point, might as well just stack them up and hope for the best. Let's break it down right now on the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. Welcome back, folks, to another episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Lamarco. After a short stint on the COVID list, I'm finally cleared and back to health, ready to drop another episode for you on the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. We're also got right now on Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel, so make sure you go to subscribe. Go hit a comment. Go hit a like. Follow us. We'll be dropping knowledge all summer long. We have consistent ADP data. We got Dynasty rookie rankings. We got rankings episodes. We got it all for you right now to get you a head start right before draft season just around the corner. Make sure you're also going to follow us on IG and TikTok at Razzball Fantasy. And of course, make sure you're going to razzball.com to get all the latest and the greatest tools and resources you need to win your fantasy drafts for baseball, hockey, basketball, and of course, fantasy football. Now I'm going to bring in my guests for today and my co-host, not even a guest, he's my co-host, Sky Gawasko. After some time off, you're refreshed, you're ready to go. What's going on, man?
Ready to go, man. Summertime, sun's out, guns out, baby. I'm feeling really good. Hey, before we get the show started, Bob, I want to take 1 second and I want to pour one out for my boy Matt Berry over at ESPN, a legend, obviously, in the fantasy football space. Everything's good. He has just decided to step away from ESPN after over a decade, nearly two. Of course, he paved the way for many independent podcasts such as Razzball, TCK, you and me, guys like this that like to sit in their basements, hunker down and crunch the numbers on fantasy football. And Matt Berry and the team at ESPN, among others, really paved the way for that years ago when fantasy football was just a hobby. Now it's literally an industry. So just want to give a shout out to Matt Berry really quick for everything that he's done for the industry. And of course, I don't know the man personally yet, but I want to give him a big up and just a tip of the cap for everything he's done for people like you and me.
Yeah, absolutely love those love-hate columns he does every year. Absolutely love Matthew Berry. And good luck to him wherever he's going or whatever he's doing in his next chapter. Well, today, folks, we're going to be talking about ADP fallers. And today, just because we're talking about ADP fallers does not mean we're talking about players we hate. We might be now talking about players we love at their new ADP. There's a way to view this episode today, folks. We're going to be talking about guys whose ADP slipped from our last update on our ADP tool. So if you want to go check it out, our ADP tool on razzball.com now has an ADP change column. So you actually could click to see who's rising and falling right on the website. I mean, it just gets better, folks. So make sure you're going, hit the link in the description, check out the latest ADP over on razzball.com. So the point of the episode and the exercise today is to check out different areas. So your top of your drafts, rounds 1 through 6, the middle round guys, and of course, late round guys that are falling. Me and Sky are going to talk about whether we don't like the player at all and we want to continue to fade him, or we're going to talk about buying those players now because of the new ADP, and it might be a chance to buy value while everyone's fading. You zig when they zag, you know, all the great cliche sayings, and you scoop up a value. So we're going to go first bucket of players we're going to talk about today are going to be on your screen. Rounds 1 through 6, and here's the list. Mark Andrews, Alvin Kamara, Patrick Mahomes, DK Metcalf, George Kittle, Antonio Gibson, J.K. Dobbins, Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin, TJ Hawkinson, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Those are our ADP haulers for rounds 1 through 6. So, Sky, tell the people which player you want to highlight, whether you're still fading them or if you're buying them at their new ADP.
There's 3 names on that list, Bob, that jump off the page for me, but 2 of them seem like a cop-out because they're injured or facing suspension. Of course, that's Alvin Kamara facing his inevitable suspension for the Vegas trip down during the Pro Bowl. And then, of course, Chris Godwin, who we don't know if he's going to be back yet from that injury, torn ACL late in the season. So hopefully he's back healthy eventually, but probably not week 1. The other guy for me, man, has another large question mark, and it's not even about him. It's the quarterback in Cleveland, Amari Cooper. So, Bob, it's too early without knowing what is actually going to happen with Deshaun Watson just yet to crunch Amari Cooper's numbers. I've been back and forth on Amari Cooper. You and I kind of went at each other on Amari Cooper last year on the TCK pod, and very much so. Like, look, he's a polarizing player. He's very, very good. He can 203 like he did against the Eagles. He can also disappear for 3 catches for 30 yards any given week. Now he goes from one of the most high-powered offenses in the Dallas Cowboys to one of the lowest octane offenses, yet productive, but more run-centric, of course, in Cleveland under Kevin Stefanski. Now, before the Deshaun Watson stuff came out, we were excited about this, but now if Deshaun Watson's missed some time, who's going to be taking the snaps in Cleveland? It isn't going to be Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield now with Carolina. So it really just starts trickling down here, and I'm not excited about the quarterback situation in Cleveland. Now, when Deshaun Watson comes back, whether it be next year, halfway through this year, of course, the situation will get better. But until we know more about that, I'm going to pause on that for a second. And Amari Cooper's numbers individually are fine. But Bob, you and I talk all the time when we're on shows together. It's about the timing and the situation. I don't like going to a new team. I don't like finding out a new scheme under that as well. Also with a new quarterback too. And on top of that, Amari Cooper's been inconsistent and needs to stay healthy as well. On top of all that, the thing that makes me the most nervous is just the scheme of what Kevin Stefanski and the Browns bring to the field. Last year, they were 28th in pass attempts per game in the NFL. They were 27th in pass play percentage, so 27th in the percentage of their plays overall being pass plays. Obviously, they are a run-first team. In the last 3 seasons, Bob, they have been number 2 behind only Seattle in rush attempts per game and 8th last year with Nick out for a number of games and Kareem Hunt hurt too. So they're going to run often, especially without Deshaun Watson. I expect them to run extra in the 5th round, middle 5th round right now. I'm just not going to do it. There's a lot of other guys I'd rather take a chance on. Gabe Davis is way down there, but he's somebody that I think with the upside of the Bills, I would consider taking. Darnell Mooney is a guy I think could have a massive leap this year as well. He's another guy I'd be willing to take. Even a Robert Woods if my boy Treylon Burks isn't working out. So for me, Amari Cooper, man, I'm just not feeling it in the 5th round. Look, falls the 7th, 6th, 7th, I'll take another look, but in the 5th round for me right now, it's not going to happen.
We're on the same page to an extent because I'll be talking about another Browns player in just a little bit. And I got some fun stats about the backup quarterback, Jacoby Brissett. So bury the lead there. All right, so my guy is actually CEH. And the reason why is when you get to a certain point in the draft, we always talk about the running back dead zone. And for the most part, the running back dead zone could vary. It could be rounds 4 through 6, 4 through 7, whatever. But once you start getting into that 7th round range, the running backs start becoming a value because that you'll see there's phases in your draft. You're going to see heavy running backs rounds 1 and 2. And then you're going to see a correction in rounds 3 and 4 with more wide receivers. And then when you start getting to that 6th, 7th round range, now everybody's on equal footing again. So those running backs, that reason why there's a dead zone is because you're drafting the RB like 20 versus the wide receiver 10 in that late 3rd, early 4th round. So that's why you see a lot of dead zone running backs not hit as well as wide receivers. But I digress. The reason why I bring up CEH is me and Sky did an podcast earlier this summer. We're going to recreate it. We have to, about how to avoid drafting a bust and what characteristics can you identify to find value in drafts for running backs. And here's a couple things. Number 1, ambiguous backfield. Because of Ronald Jones being there, and this has been popularized by JJ Zachariason, I got to give him credit for that. But the uncertainty of backfields have pushed ADPs down for good players. And CEH now, because of Ronald Jones, has been now pushed to the 6-7 turn. He's at the back end of this list. The second thing is, when you want to find a good running back, you want a top 16 quarterback. Well, he has Patrick Mahomes. So a top 16 fantasy quarterback in ADP, slam dunk, he's got Patrick Mahomes. The other aspect is a top 20 offensive line. You want a competent offensive line. The Chiefs have a top 10 offensive line. So he checks all the boxes you need to find a breakout. And now he's falling almost to the 7th round. And I guarantee you he's going to go at the 6-7 turn pretty much through the summer because there's going to be a lot of uncertainty with Ronald Jones. And that's why I love CEH at his current ADP. And I will be willing to draft him at his current slot because he's fallen so much. Let's jump down to the next bucket, which is round 7 to 12. And here's the fallers in that range. It's Michael Thomas, Dak Prescott, Elijah Moore, Hunter Renfrow, Drake London, Kenneth Walker, Cordell Patterson, Aaron Rodgers, Brandon Ayuk, Treylon Burks, Sky Moore, Ronald Jones, Christian Watson, James Robinson, and Jameson Williams, Jahan Dotson are the list. So that's a pretty long one. That's a lot. So Sky, tell us which ADP faller has piqued your interest to talk about on the show in this range.
Yeah, that is a long list because we're taking an average of who's being drafted within those rounds. So it's a lot of names there, of course. Man, I want to go Cordero Patterson, Bob, so bad and ride the wave, but I can't do it. I can't do it just yet. Look, man, I'm going to piggyback on the Chiefs. Let's talk about the new guy in town. You talked about CEH. Made a good case for him. I'm going to talk about his teammate here, Ronald Jones, right? Comes over after Tampa Bay, kind of threw him out to pasture. Leonard Fournette comes in 2 years ago, dominates in the playoffs, come back next year. He's the obvious number one. And Brady and Arians did not have faith in Ronald Jones, had a couple fumbles, missed a couple of blocks. The rest is history. Let me dial it back to him coming out of USC in the second round, though. Again, I'm a Pac-12 guy. I am biased to the Pac-12, although not much of a 12 anymore. But we'll get to college football some other day. But I watch a lot of Pac-12 football. USC, I watch a lot of Ronald Jones at USC. Dude's a beast. Came out, he didn't have much of an opportunity with Tampa from the beginning, and Arians didn't really give him a shot because he didn't play rookies and he fumbled the ball, yada yada. Well, he gets a fresh start, and that helps a lot of players, especially younger players. And with him going to Kansas City, all of the things that you had mentioned for CEH, of course, as far as the increased offensive line, Patrick Mahomes, yada, yada, Andy Reid, top 5 scoring offense every year, those all benefit Ronald Jones as well. It's going to be who is the starter. Well, if we look at Andy Reid over the years, he has had a bell cow, if you will, back when he has one. He's tried CEH for a year or two, and it's just he's not that type of back. I think CEH is a good back in the NFL. He's not the type of back that I think fantasy managers and Andy Reid thought they were drafting. He's not Brian Westbrook, so we could get rid of that finally. But Ronald Jones helps. Maybe a little bit in pass protection, but he can also help around the goal line. And I think a big issue with CEH that has disappointed people, especially people who drafted him number 7 overall as a rookie in single quarterback leagues, a big one was he isn't scoring enough to warrant that number, right? I mean, Travis Kelce has more rushing touchdowns than CEH does since he's been on the team, right? Like that just doesn't make sense. So I'm concerned there. Now, as far as the rushing offense for the Chiefs, you don't really think of the Chiefs as a rushing offense, and they're not. I don't want to get too carried away. They're a pass first offense, obviously. However, they were very surprising to me when I dug into the numbers. So last year, they were 28th in rushing play percentage. I know I use that metric a lot, but for me, that basically takes pass plays and rush plays and splits them and kind of, moves the needle one way or another to see how the offense runs their offense. A team like Tennessee, a team like Seattle, a team like Cleveland, they're going to be higher rushing percentage plays. A team like, the Chargers, the Rams, the Chiefs, higher pass play percentage. So the Chiefs were 28th in rushing play percentage, but they were 20th in rush attempts per game, which is good. That's high efficiency. Even better than that, Bob, they were 13th in rushing yards per game, and CEH was not very effective, right? So that's a second, third, fourth string guy, Derek Gore, Darrell Williams. They have a lot of these other guys putting in work. So I think Ronald Jones is going to get a fresh start. He's going to be in there on third downs minimum. I think he might be the goal line back. And in that offense, man, if he can score from 1, 2, 3 yards out, he could accidentally end up scoring 8 to 10 touchdowns. I know it sounds insane. It could happen in this offense. They've wanted that back, haven't had it. Darrell Williams has played very well. Derek Gore played well in spurts. Spencer Ware back in the day behind Jamal Charles filled in really well as a backup also. So I like Ronald Jones, and you have CEH in the 6th round. I'm going to wait 4 whole rounds, which is a lot for a potentially starting, maybe a league-winning running back if he becomes the number 1 in the 10th round. To me, that's value all day.
I'm going to take both. I think it's going to be one of my key strategies to have both guys because I don't care anymore. At that range, them and the Bills running backs are the perfect type of ambiguous backfield to just take low draft capital on. And if one of those guys hit, it's like the Leonard Fournette, Ronald Jones thing from last year. All you need is one to hit, and you already hit the draft. It's fine. So that's why I go ahead.
Let me throw one more at you if you're talking about taking both of them. This one's much more expensive. We've talked about the last 2 years. Would you do Chubb and Hunt? I did it 2 years ago and won a championship, so I feel good about it, but they're both coming off injury.
Hunt was surprisingly good last year in his limited play. It depends, right? I think personally, I probably wouldn't. But I'm actually changing my mind about Hunt a little bit, but I digress. That's a whole. You had me. My mind started drifting. I'm like, I gotta get back to the show.
There's Dearness Johnson. There's talking he might get traded too. So I don't know, but I like the middle two backs. That's a good spot.
No, all right. So my guy's Hunter Renfro. I actually started this. Here's a couple disclaimers. The first one I actually thought about was the rookie wide receivers Drake London and Traylon Burks, because I did an analysis recently, and JJ Zacharyson is another guy who did something like this, where inside the first 9 rounds, wide receiver rookies actually hit pretty well, and those guys are some that are actually are falling when I feel like they shouldn't. Because there has been rookie success when you're talking about higher draft capital rookies. Once you start getting the double digits, they're not great. The second one was Cordell Patterson, you just brought up. I kind of went down a rabbit hole with him, and I don't know, man. It feels weird. He is a very strange case. We definitely got to talk about him at another time, but his receiving work is what really plummeted, and surprisingly over the second half of the year, which doesn't make sense. So I started looking at Hunter Renfro, and the first thing that came to mind with Hunter Renfro was this guy 15.4 PPR points per game, wide receiver 16 in points per game last year. And I'm like, okay, Devontae Adams comes in, new coaching staff. I totally get all that. But he now is being drafted as the wide receiver 36. Okay. So the wide receiver 36 averaged 12.6. So we're already baking in 3 points less this year with Devontae Adams. However, we might not even have to worry about Devontae Adams. In my new available targets analysis I put together, they have 217 opportunities. Okay. That's not including Waller and Hunter Renfro stuff. Now, key and the best part too is the types of targets. Zay Jones, Brian Edwards, Henry Ruggs, Deshaun Jackson, all those guys have in common are perimeter receivers where Devontae Adams will be playing most of the time with Hunter Renfro in the slot. So there's plenty of targets from those guys, 184 just from those type of players that Devontae Adams can get without even touching Hunter Renfro. Now, also look at Josh McDaniels' history at wide receiver twos. Now, when they had wide receiver twos, they've had some monster seasons. If you want to talk about upside, what about Wes Welker and Randy Moss in 2007, 2008? They both finished as top 12 wide receivers, 14.7 and 17.6 points per game in those seasons. So the number 2 receiver, not the number 1, the number 2. Then you look at like more reasonable ones. Brandon Lloyd, Brandon LaFell, both finished as top 26 wide receivers. That's 10 spots higher than his ADP. If you want to talk floor, let's talk Danny Amendola. Danny Amendola. Danny Amendola is not Hunter Renfro. And first of all, number one, Renfro's playing the prime slot spot, and those were wide receiver 44. So, like, if you start looking at the wide receiver 2 upside of this, there's been plenty of scenarios in the Josh McDaniel offense where he's had 2 featured wide receivers. And yes, that includes guys with Gronk on the roster, folks. So it's not just because if Waller's not going to have a spot. But also look at Derek Carr's number 2s. When he had Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree from 2015 to 2017, the number 2 receiver, which was Cooper every single season, was between wide receiver 16 and wide receiver 35. So he supported 3 times top 36 wide receivers, and twice those guys were 21 and 16. So it's been proven time and time again that the offense and also the quarterback can support top 24 receivers, 2 of them. So I personally feel that he's being undervalued because of Devontae Adams, and you're going to get a steal, especially in PPR formats. All right, let's jump down to the final ADP faller section, round 13 plus. David Njoku, Darrell Williams, Jamison Crowder, Robert Tonyan, George Pickens, Raheem Mostert, Deshaun Watson, Alex Pierce, Rob Gronkowski, Logan Thomas, Sony Michel, Curtis Samuel, Odell Beckham, and David Bell. It's a Cleveland fiasco over here. So basically, those are the ADP fallers after round 13. So, Sky, tell us about the player you want to touch on for this range.
Yeah, there's a ton of guys here. I mean, you're starting to talk about like the free lottery picks, right? I mean, we haven't seen David Njoku yet, but what if Darrell Williams is floating around but played okay? Jamison Crowder's been well. Odell Beckham, if he comes back healthy for even half a season and gets an opportunity, he could be a league winner at that point. Rob Gronkowski, like officially retired today, basically saying like he's done with football. But what if he comes back late in the season as well? So there's a lot of options there. But for me, man, I'm gonna throw a dart at a rookie here, and I'm gonna go with Alec Pierce. And second round pick for the Colts. Michael Pittman is the clear number 1, but Zach Pascal, I mean, everybody loves the guy, but he can't stay healthy. He's looking good in camp so far, but is that going to continue? I'm not necessarily buying it until I see it. For me, going to be a new quarterback with Indianapolis and Matt Ryan. And yes, Matt Ryan is clearly past his prime. However, in my opinion, he's a better pure passer and quarterback in general, both cerebral and talent, other than running the football, than Carson Wentz was last year. And the Colts and the Falcons have similar numbers passing, if you break everything down. So I won't dive into the weeds too much. Basically, the Falcons were just a horrible offense in general, which hurt Matt Ryan in the offense, whereas the Colts were a very good offense, but running the football, not necessarily passing it. So in pretty much every metric you can find in passing, they're both bottom 10 in the NFL. But to me, there's an upgraded quarterback with Matt Ryan from Carson. And also, again, I think Alec Pierce, you're taking him in the second round for a wide receiver, right? I mean, there's been a lot of wide receivers. I'm not saying he's DK Metcalf. I'm not saying he's AJ Brown or Tyreek Hill or any of these guys, but you get some of those guys, Juju Smith-Schuster, you get some of those guys in the second round, they get opportunity because there's nobody in front of them. If Zach Pascal goes down again, which he has unfortunately every year of his career, there's not a lot of other threat there. T.Y. Hilton, other people, right? Your boy Mo Alley Cox. Jonathan Taylor's going to get the ball 30 times a game, but there's 30 other plays. Michael Pittman might see, 10, 12 targets, but there's still another 10 to 12, 15 that are going to float around. If Alec Pierce can see 6 to 7, in my opinion, per game, which might be hefty for a rookie, but if he builds into that role, I really do think he has the touchdown upside. And one thing that I heard a while back that's sticking in my head with this, Julio Jones is arguably the best player of his generation, right? Outside of Antonio Brown, Devontae Adams, some of these other guys. But he never had the touchdowns. It was embarrassing, right? Because Matt Ryan wouldn't throw to him double, triple covered in the red zone. He may not do that with Michael Pittman either. And if he looks elsewhere, Alec Pierce should be running one-on-one. He's a big wide receiver, can play the slot, can also play outside. Also, Mike Clay broke down formerly of ESPN as well. Mike Clay broke down basically his projections for rookie wide receiver receiving yards on the season. And Alec Pierce is not talked about in the top 5 rookie wideouts of this class. But according to Mike Clay, he averaged him about 750 to 800 yards receiving because of the opportunity, vacated targets, and everything else. So Alec Pierce, to me, man, in the 13th to 15th round here, why not? You could end up getting a wide receiver 2 on his team, maybe a wide receiver 3 upside. And again, if nothing else, a flex during bye weeks. I like this kid a lot in general coming in for film. And I can't get Austin Collie out of my head, who was a stud for about 4 weeks, 19 years ago in fantasy football. So if Alec Pierce can give me Austin Collie vibes minus the concussions, I'm all in.
I like it. All right, let's jump down to my last player. It's David Njoku. And so I want to talk about, I'm taking a different approach here. It's about Jacoby Brissett for me. Now, a lot of people are scrambling because Deshaun Watson might be done. He might not play, right? So it really lands on what about Jacoby Brissett? We have 2 full seasons of Jacoby Brissett. Plus, he played a lot of games with the Dolphins last year. So there's a lot of sample to understand what is going to be the floor. What if Jacoby Brissett plays 17 games? So, what is the floor for these guys? So we have data on this, and I wanted to bring it to the show today because David Njoku should not be faded because, number one, it's starting to sound like Deshaun Watson might not be out the whole season. They're starting to say 6 games or whatever. This is just making it more exciting for me. But let's talk about David Njoku as the player first. He averaged 4 more yards per reception than Austin Hooper did. 13 yards per reception. That's elite for tight ends. He's a field-stretching tight end. Now, when he plays 64% of the snaps or more, don't ask me why, it's just how it happened on the back end. 64% is the separator, whatever. He averaged 10 PPR points per game. So that's about fringe tight end 1, like top 15 range for tight ends. Now, let's talk Jacoby Brissett. So when you look at his numbers in 2017 and 2019, the one position that really still flourished was the tight end. Jack Doyle had 11.5 points per game. He finished that season as the tight end 6 in 2017. So he's already supported, Jacoby Brissett has supported a top 10 tight end, and it was Jack Doyle. Okay? I love Captain Jack. Don't get me wrong. But David Njoku is a freak and a first-round pick. I think he could do some stuff with him. Then the following time, 2019, he actually had 2 tight ends featured as Eric Ebron and Jack Doyle. They averaged combined 15.4 points per game between the 2 of them. That's elite production. And now, on average, the tight ends averaged in PPR, the top 2 averaged 15 PPR points per game in the seasons with Jacoby Brissett. That's a lot of tight end production. And if he can get his piece of the pie, that is huge. Then look at the last 6 games, the 6 games of 2021 with the Miami Dolphins. Mike Gesicki, in the games he actually played with Jacoby Brissett, averaged double-digit fantasy points better than what he actually had with Tua. So it looks like you could see and over that time frame, he was the tight end 9 in the 6 games with Jacoby Brissett. So I feel like, yes, there is going to be a cap to the upside. There is no Deshaun Watson. I do feel that the ceiling for Amari Cooper does come down. I do think that maybe the other ancillary guys like David Bell and Donovan Peoples-Jones don't have as much appeal later in rounds. But the one guy I feel like has appeal either way is David Njoku, because he's not being treated as a tight end one, but Jacoby Brissett can support a tight end one. And then if you can get Deshaun Watson after week 6, you just landed probably a league-winning tight end down the stretch, who, by the way, is falling in drafts. So I think that Jacoby Brissett, people need to know that this guy is competent enough to support multiple people in the passing game and a solid running back long enough until Deshaun Watson come back. So I think there's a huge value there for David Njoku. All right,
Dude,
folks, that's go ahead.
I was just gonna say I think it's a great call. Another thing too, Bob, is they just signed him for a 4-year extension. He's their guy, massively more talented than Austin Hooper, of course, and Harrison Bryant. Before we go, Bob, I just have to give you a quick knock. You're a pro host. You're fabulous. I can't believe I've let it gone too long. I can't believe we didn't start the show with the news that N'Keal Harry gets a fresh start in Chicago.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, man. I mean, feel free to talk about that one up. Do you think he's toast? What? Give me your insight then on it. If you want to bring it up, you tell the people what you think about it. Right?
Great prospect. Loved him coming out of college. Another Pac-12 guy. Give me some, dude. There's nobody else there. Darnell Mooney is the guy. Not excited about anybody else right now in Chicago. Give me some N'Keal Harry in the 19th round. Love it. I think it's a fresh start. I think the kid's going to be great.
All right, folks, that's it. You come for the fallers. Talk about fallers. Talk about N'Keal Harry. He's a faller.
Remember N'Keal Harry?
Yeah, he was the thing. Well, that's all we got for today. This is once again the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. Make sure you guys are going to check out the latest episodes over on YouTube. Make sure you're going to TikTok and IG at Razzball Fantasy to check out all the great content. And make sure you're also going to razzball.com to check out all the great articles on basketball, baseball, hockey, and football. Once again, I'm your host, Bobby Lamarco. You can find me at Bobby Lamarco on Twitter. And then you'll find there's my co-host, Sky Gawasco. Make sure you follow him at Sky Gawasco on Twitter as well. Thank you for joining us again. We are out of here.